Chandra Natsalansa here for Woodworker's Journal in the Skill Builder series on maintaining woodshop machinery. And today we're going to look at the drill press, which is really a pretty simple machine. It's just a chuck at the end of a spindle that's powered by a motor with a quill that allows it to go up and down while you're drilling. But if you don't maintain your drill press, there are a number of things that could go wrong with it that will compromise drilling performance and accuracy. A few of the drill press maintenance tasks you should do regularly include cleaning and lubricating the drill chuck, examining the belt and drive pulleys for damage or wear, removing looseness in the chuck and quill tube, checking the chuck and spindle for wobble, setting the table square with the bit, and adjusting the table's raising and lowering mechanism. One of the most important things you can do for your drill press is to keep its chuck clean and operating smoothly so it centers the bit properly. Start by using an abrasive pad if you need to remove any grime or fine rust from the outside surface of the chuck and the jaws. Now open the jaws all the way up and with safety glasses on, use a blast of compressed air to remove any sawdust that's up inside. Now then, you'll want to apply a film of a drying lubricant like Shield T9 up inside the chuck. Afterwards, operate the jaws a couple of times to work the stuff in. You can blow out any excess with more compressed air. And wipe the jaws and outside of the chuck clean, and you're all set. Now with the drill press unplugged, we're going to remove the head cover in order to expose the pulleys in the belt so that we can inspect them for wear and damage. All right. Now what I want to do here first is basically just rotate the pulley around and give it a good visual inspection. I'm looking for any cracks, separations in the ply, or lumps that might be on the surface or the edges of this V-belt. I'm also going to look carefully at the surfaces of the pulleys themselves to see if there are any dings or dents or anything that's really out of the ordinary. If you find any signs of damage or excessive wear to either the belt or the pulleys, the best thing to do is simply to replace them. Since the belt and pulleys on this variable speed model are in good order, I'm going to plug the drill press back in and with the face shield on, start up the motor to make sure the variable speed mechanism operates smoothly. I'm also listening for excessive growling or vibration that may indicate worn bearings that need replacement. If your drill press doesn't feature continuous variable speed but instead has a pair of step pulleys like on this one, you'll want to check the pulleys, of course, as before, but also in this case the drive pulley, you want to see that it's tight on the motor's shaft. If it's not, you can use a regular Allen wrench to tighten up the set screw. On this style of drill press, you'll also want to check the tightness of the belt. Basically pinch it right here in the middle. It shouldn't deflect by more than, say, 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch. If it's too loose, simply loosen the bolts that hold the motor assembly to the head of the drill press. Slide the entire head assembly out until the belt is at the proper tension. The next tune-up task we're going to tackle is to make sure that the drill press's chuck is tight on the end of the spindle and that the quill tube, which is the hollow column in which the spindle rotates, fits tightly yet rides smoothly inside the head casting. First thing to do is to extend the quill all the way down and lock it in place. Now, grab the chuck firmly and the quill tube and try to move them back and forth. If you detect any movement at all, some adjustment is warranted. If it feels like the chuck is loose on the end of the spindle, usually the best thing to do is to remove the chuck and then to refit it and retighten it. Now, on this particular drill press, there's a slot here in the quill tube with a hole that allows you to insert a tapered pin that comes with the drill press. Put the pin in there like that, then strike it with a mallet until the chuck comes out. Now this particular chuck mounts onto a tapered shaft permanently. Other models I've seen have a set screw inside here which needs tightening in some cases. But at any rate, you want to get the surfaces of this taper absolutely clean so that they mate perfectly with the socket inside the spindle. Now before we remount the chuck, we want to make sure that the tapered socket is also nice and clean. So first, I'm going to blow out any sawdust with a little compressed air. Then I'm going to use the tip of a rag and just feed it up in here and twist it around to get out any residual grease and grime. All right, now we want to rotate the table out of the way. We want to go ahead and let the quill tube come back up all the way top. Now we're going to slip the chuck shaft in here, position it, and I'm just going to give the bottom of the chuck with the jaws retracted a nice firm blow with a dead blow mallet. And that's all it takes to firmly remount this particular chuck. Your drill press's chuck might mount slightly differently, so when in doubt, consult the owner's manual. If you detect that there's any movement between the quill tube and the head casting of the drill press, you might be able to remove this play. Some newer drill presses have a small set screw that rides in a groove on the side of the quill tube. By loosening the lock nut and then readjusting this set screw, you can actually remove a certain amount of the play. After the adjustment, check to make sure that you haven't over-tightened the screw and that the quill still moves up and down freely. If you've noticed that your workpiece dances around a bit when you're trying to bore a hole with a straight bit, it could be because there's some eccentricity caused by a bent spindle or perhaps a damaged chuck. The way to check for this wobble, otherwise known as runout, is with a wonderfully handy tool known as a dial indicator, here mounted to a magnetic base. Now before you start checking for runout, you want to make sure that your drill press is unplugged, and you want to chuck a perfectly straight and smooth shaft into the chuck. Now I'm going to use what's known as a machinist transfer punch for this. Again, a very straight, smooth-sided rod. I'm going to chuck this in here very lightly, not tighten it too much. Now I'm going to go ahead and mount the dial indicator to the table of the drill press, bringing its plunger in light contact with the shaft. Notice that basically the plunger is meeting it perpendicularly. Now I'm going to go ahead and zero the dial indicator out. In other words, I want the needle to point to 0. And I'm just going to rotate the chuck by hand slowly and see how far the needle moves away from 0 in either direction. Now the 0.02 of an inch runout that I'm reading here is perfectly acceptable for woodworking operations. But if you're reading something more like 0.05 or 8 or 0.10 of an inch of runout, you might want to try the procedure described in photos and text in the webzine article for removing wobble from your drill press's spindle. Before I remove the transfer punch rod from the drill press, there's one more thing I want to check with it. And that is to make sure that the drill press table is exactly square to the bit. After all, this is the position you use it 99% of the time. So I'm going to use a high quality tri-square. I'm going to set it on the drill press table so that it's perpendicular to the axis of the table. Then I'm going to set a white card behind this area. I'll show you why in a second. I'm going to come around here and I'm going to sight to see if there's any small angled gap between the tri-square and the rod. And the white behind it will help me see the gap better. In this case, I can see a gap, and so I'm going to have to use my wrench to loosen up the pivot point of the table. Then I'm going to tap the table a little at a time until the two are lined up. Tighten the bolt and check the setting again. The last bit of drill press maintenance we're going to do today is to clean, lubricate, and adjust the rack and pinion gear system that allows our drill press's table to be cranked up and down. First, I'm going to go ahead and spray the rack with a penetrating lubricant. Here I'm using WD-40. That's going to help loosen up the packed-in sawdust and grime in those gear teeth. Then I'm going to use a stiff bristle brush to try to remove as much of that stuff as I can. When you're done brushing the teeth clean, use a rag to remove as much of the penetrating lubricant as you can, as this is wet and basically will attract just more dust and grime that will gum up the gears. Then you can spray the entire assembly with a dry lubricant such as Bow-Shield T9. Now there's one more adjustment that we have to make, and that is the collar that allows this entire table assembly to pivot around is held at the top by a single set screw. And you want to adjust this set screw so that it can pivot freely and not bind on the column. Now we'll check the motion. Smooth as butter. This drill press is ready for action.